My two guests on FIT TV today were all blindsided by a lack of justice in family court. Like most, they understood the scales of justice to be fair and competent. Like most who exit the system, find otherwise. There was no clear fundamental cause and effect relationship between a family court and the right thing to do for divorcing families. These two have suffered injustices that are beyond logic, and no court could see clear benefits to the litigants or their families in these situations. Our hope is to add sunlight to your eyes and ears so that you can better be prepared in case divorce is imminent in your life. Family court must be blinded by this light. I have with me to discuss their own issues about being a victim at a family court. On my left, Melissa Shea, who's a victim of a judge's abuse, and to her left, Dr. Carlos Rivera, who's come back to tell us a lot about what's going on with his situation as he goes back and forth in the court. Okay, so let's start with you, Melissa. We usually have Doc on, so it's your shot.
It's my shot.
What's up?
What's up? So it was like most people, you know, you wind up in a relationship you think is going to last forever, and then when you find out that there's issues going on there, you think you can handle it. And for most people, I don't think they've ever been in court until they have to go through a divorce. And so my husband at the time was pretty abusive. I was almost 36 weeks pregnant when he broke my jaw and caused harm to myself, harm to the baby, had to have induced labor, internal bleeding, a lot of things that happened. It wasn't just a simple...
That's not a minor thing.
No, it wasn't a minor thing. You know, it required me being stitched while I was awake because they couldn't give me anesthesia with the baby. Whoa. So I was too close to term, and the doctor was actually crying at the time because he had inflicted so much pain on me, and my screams were heard through the whole room, and he didn't even go to jail. Didn't go to jail. We were brought to IDV court.
And IDV court is?
Integrated Domestic Violence Court.
Okay.
So I started a petition to get divorced, and even at that point I still thought you had to go to court to get a divorce, even in domestic violence situations. There were two components, and I think people need to be made aware of this, that when a domestic incident involves, that has to be dealt with the criminal courts, and a divorce can still be handled in mediation, even if there is an order of protection.
So you're saying that it can be that way? As I understood it, they don't usually pull out those situations. They don't pull them out to criminal court.
No, in this case, they combined it all under IDV court.
The IDV.
Yeah, and they don't break it out. But if you wanted to get a divorce, you could still do that outside in the mediation. But in this particular case, I had filed for divorce because I thought you have to go to court to file divorce, and that's not really, that's a myth out there.
Right, right.
Even in domestic violence situations. In my case, we were kind of, everything just happened all at once, you know. The judge issued an order of protection for me and the children. That was Judge Krecker, and he did so on 2007. My ex-husband violated that court order of protection, was arrested 7 more times, put in jail. The most he served was 3 weeks because he couldn't make the bail. And when he was finally sentenced, the judge didn't give him any time, even though he had 2 felonies.
But didn't you do him a favor at some point by not pursuing?
Yeah, because I felt that the judge asked me, you know, they said they were going to put him away for 5 years, and I said, how is that going to benefit my children? Because I felt that putting him in jail was going to be a reflection on the children, because if they had to go to school and ask, what does your daddy do for a living? Well, he's doing time. I just felt that that would have a negative impact on the children. So I advocated that we just need time away from him, that he still needed to have a relationship with the children, not for his sake, but more for the children's sake.
Right.
Because right, wrong, or indifferent, that's still their father. And as a person who is of domestic violence, both male or female, I think we have to recognize the relationship between the parents is always different from that of the children. And so if you really love your child, you will never insist on that parent going to jail or...
Yeah, it's funny how that doesn't ever really enter the court. The child's view never gets to the point where they can have a statement that works, that can say, you know, I'd like to have my mom and dad involved together still, you know, even no matter what form it comes in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even the most horrific cases, I mean, Adolf Hitler was a father. I mean, he had a relationship with his children. He was a horrible man. But the fact is that there is a bond between and to deny a child who their father or their mother is to deny the child a piece of them.
Sure,
So, you know, it could be supervised visits, and that was fine. You know, it could be if there's a prediction, a point where they may cause harm to the children, then obviously there has to be some interference of or supervision there. But this wasn't the case. He, whatever, temporary lost his mind, whatever the case may be. But shortly after that, I made an agreement with the judge and the DA that if I moved out of state with the children, that the father wouldn't go to jail. So I had to leave my friends and family, my job, I had to file bankruptcy, moved out of state to...
That seems a little strange, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't know why I did that, actually. But I really thought I was doing the best interest of the children. I thought we would all be fine in the end. I didn't realize what was about to happen, which was more devastating than, you know, getting knocked around. So when I came back to New York, because I figured things were calm, he was with a girlfriend, my father became ill, I wanted to be there for his death. I moved me and the children back, and he said, you know, I did a lot of things wrong to you, let me help you with the children, I'll take them a little bit. So we instituted a joint custody arrangement, even though I had sole custody at the time. And lo and behold, several months later, he filed a petition for sole custody. And the same judge that granted me sole custody and gave us the court orders, and the children had a court order in effect, he took them and gave them to the father.
What do you think changed in his...
The judge said he was, how dare she move back to New York? That's what he said to the court, and I'll show her. And that's what he did. He took the kids and he gave them to my ex-husband, who...
I would love to see the language in that paper. That
of course, he strikes it off the record, and you know, that's why I believe that there should be court cameras, you know, because this kind of behavior, and Judge Crocker...
It would stop, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Judge Crocker has a history of giving the violent offenders the custody of the children, which is dangerous for the children, dangerous, more hurtful to the person. I mean, I said it before on this show, I would rather be beaten every day and be able to kiss my children goodnight and have a deformed face than having to deal with the pain of losing a child, and much less 3 boys. And Gary Jacobs alluded it to another show where how do you ask, a law guardian asks a 4-year-old, my children were 2, 4, and 7, and they asked, who do you want to live with, your father or your mother? And my 7-year-old, who's autistic, he said, I want to live with my dad, and that's how it worked out. And my 2 and my 4-year-old, I said, my 2-year-old said to you, what kind of decision could a 2-year-old make, you know?
How does he make a sentence together, right?
It just was unbelievable.
I think, well, I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's one of the things that that seems to baffle me. From start to finish, I can't understand any of the process. But the long-term arrangement that the long-term effects people don't seem to be aware of. And we make these decisions, and we work under the pretense, or it's under the pretense it's in the best interest of the children, and no one looks at time after time the studies that are showing the higher rate of depression, suicide, you name it, problems with the children into adulthood. And these are the cycles that can perpetuate. These are these children that think, okay, this is the way a marriage and a divorce works, and it becomes ingrained in society. No one's looking at the long-term effects, and it really, really upsets me. The more I find out about it, the harder it becomes. And I think Melissa couldn't say it any better. No one knows that pain. We've all been through loss of family members, loss of people we love. Forget about financial loss. You can get back from that. Missing your kids is the most horrible experience I have ever faced, and I'm sure it's the worst thing that you've ever faced.
You know, the name of my organization as a mediator, and also of the show, is FIT, stands for Families in Transition. The thing I noticed over time, sociologically speaking, is the dysfunction that children was adding up. As a pediatrician, I'm sure you can relate to this. And you look at families broken up, and you go, well, you see the inordinate way that they act with others, whereas before you may not have seen that. Of course, you know, intact families have problems with their kids too. I don't mean to think that it's a carte blanche issue, but you know it's increasing with all these numbers. It's increasing.
And it's a shame because it becomes a matter of control, and abuse is about control, and abuse really stems from fear. So I had compassion for my ex-husband in the sense that this all stems from fear, his own insecurities, his own fears, but it perpetuated itself. But what was worse is that the court stood behind him, because now my 3 boys now, well, it's okay to hit your wife because Daddy didn't have to pay child support, Daddy didn't go to jail, Daddy didn't, you know, he got custody.
Not a good message.
What message did that just send? So you talk about long-term effect. My children are going to go up, and they're going to now live in an abusive household because he didn't change his behavior. Now he's with another woman who same kind of behavior is going on. So they think that this is, and because the courts awarded him custody, he's the better parent, right? And that's the message that that sends.
Backs up the bad experience with some.
The stigmata as well.
Yeah.
I think the stigmata is a huge one. You mentioned school-age children. Gary Jacobs mentioned before, what does your daddy do? Oh, he went to jail. I think in my case, you know, it really stood out as a pediatrician who did jail time. Therefore, I must have really done something bad and egregious. And in Melissa's case, the polar opposite. And I honestly think that in some ways that the prejudice she faces and the stigmata is much worse than what I faced.
Right.
Because there's societal views. You make these blanket statements, or you knee-jerk reactions. So you heard the story, therefore that woman must be, don't get me wrong, and this is not how I feel, but she must have been a horrible mother to lose custody. There has to be something wrong there for the courts to right.
In her case, she's got stigma attached to the decision, because most of the custody awards are going the other way, so she's more likely to be a custodial parent than a non-custodial parent.
Over decades, when you look at those graphs from the 70s on.
It barely moved.
Yeah, 80s, it's 80% is the women and 10% of 17% is the men. And that's it. It's just like, how do you explain that graph?
Well, that graph explains what our problems are with the whole system. You can't completely lopside by gender a decision. That's what they're doing. They're making gender decisions.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it.
And
no,
sorry,
I was going to say that, you know, and ours stand out as more as examples to the disbelief. I think when people look at his story or my story, they say, well, he really had to do something. They don't just throw anybody in jail for 6 months, or they don't just take anybody's kids away, especially with the history of 2 felonies of, you know, assault and criminal contempt. And, you know, but I think what we're trying to alert people is this unfortunately can happen, and then you can be walking into a landmine by not understanding that the court is set up in an adversarial manner, and don't be pressured to sign an agreement that you think you're doing the right thing for the child at the time. I think when you're getting divorced, you just want to settle it, you know? You get to that point where, oh, just settle it and I'll sign anything. Be careful, because you don't understand when we talk about long-term effects. They'll hold you to that, no matter what your lifestyle changes after.
We're hoping on the show to get people to not only look at what they would do under the pressure of a court, but also not to decide, this is what you were saying, not to decide that a signature or you put yourself in a place in harm's way to create fodder for the court when you sign an agreement too soon, or when you agree to something that you don't have to agree to. So should we fight? You know, that's a tough question. Do you go? What happens if you're on the lower economic threshold and you don't have the money to fight? There are people who get stuck signing these agreements because they don't know what else to do. They don't have any support.
I think part of the problem is you're naive. You believe in the system, that it's going to work, that it's fair. You know, I was raised with a love of this country, respect police, respect judges, respect lawyers, respect military. So you believe wholeheartedly, and that was one of the biggest things for me. It was just like, oh my God, this is not how the way the system works. And to this day, I still have problems. Like, you asked me if I would sign this agreement again. Never in its form that it was, but at the same time, the intent was always to make it smoother for my children, to make the transition well. I'll take the hit. I'll take the hit as long as my children are okay, and that's allowed to be exploited. Society is it's ingrained in society to become abusive in a divorce, and we just look at it and we accept it as something that's okay. We don't really pay attention to what's going on with kids. Everyone says, oh, you shouldn't use kids as pawns. It's like, are you really watching what's going on? And one thing I really love about the idea in your last show that you were speaking of is put television cameras in court. It made me think of something which I actually think funny is my aunt really, we used to believe in Congress and Senate, we were all filled with like geniuses, and these are the people representing us, until you see C-SPAN. And you're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe this person's representing.
Channel 78 on your local dial. Yes, you should be watching that, ladies and gentlemen.
It's true, and then you sit down and you really watch, it's like, I cannot believe that these are the people making our laws. And granted, some of them are very, very good. and some of them, you just can't believe that this is the process. And I think that if people had access to this information, things would change. I truly believe that things are going to change through media. I don't believe that I'm going to petition politicians, that I'm going to get the world's greatest, most benevolent lawyer, kind of like, what's that movie, The Rainmaker, where you just have that honest lawyer who's really pushing for the truth. The truth will come from the outside. People as in yourself and your show who are going to show what's going on. And when people see that, they're like, oh my God.
We have to get the word out there through the media. There's no question about it.
Exactly. That's why I made my story. I'm sorry. That's why I made my story public. Not because I enjoy being humiliated or I'm looking for sympathy.
Somebody had to do it. No, you have a lot of pride in what you do. You wouldn't be able to do what you do unless you had machismo in here that says, you know, this is what I got to do.
Actually, it wasn't until I was going to jail because I couldn't believe it. When I got that letter saying that I was going to jail, I gave $494,000 in 4 years. Like, no way. And I opened that up. I was like, you have to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I'm going to jail. And at that point, it's like, people need to know what happens here.
Right.
And
no, I'm glad that you did, by the way, very glad you did. Both of you. You had impactful cases that should be opened up. The sunlight should be shined in on your case. I'm hoping that we do this now.
I'm hoping that governors there's no reason why a parent becomes a visitor. There's no reason why you lose your parental rights. I lost my parental rights. How?
Yeah, right.
When did I stop being a mom? When did I stop be given the right to kiss them goodnight or being told I can't see them at school?
Doesn't it? Think about it. Outrageous.
It's absurd.
That's exactly what it is, and it has to stop. And I think that's why it's so important, and we're so passionate about telling these stories.
And I'm glad you are. Yeah,
because these need to change, and it's a lot of people are silent because the pain is unbearable. It really is. I mean, it'll put you in a hospital 10 times over.
True.
But if you can speak out about it, and if there's other listeners, I encourage you to reach out to FIT to hear these stories, because it's unless these stories are heard that we can do some change.
You know, real quick on my own situation, I don't want to spend a lot of time on mine, but because I was so outraged by the debate, because when I found I was wronged, I went in to investigate right away, and I went into the Child Support Standards Act. I went and got the full debate jacket, and I looked at it, and I couldn't believe my eyes that these people were debating these issues like as if we were not present. And the trouble is, there is no presence. There's no connection between, that's what I said in the opening. They lost the connection between what's good for families and what's right for an agenda. They have this. All these things are agenda-based. If you don't mind, I'd like to go up, give me a little bit of an update, because we didn't get to you. I know I had a chance to talk to her. Give us a little bit of an update on what happened, where you're at.
Well, I think that it becomes so convoluted and long to give a short version. It's impossible. Basically, we share the fact that we were naive. In my case, also, I wanted to be what would be best for my children. Signed an agreement that I acquiesced to every one of my ex-wife's demands. And that was a mistake. And I was working under the guidance of a lawyer. My lawyer wrote up my divorce agreement, which is the worst agreement on earth.
Yeah.
And I have it looked at constantly. People are like, did you have a lawyer present? It's like, my lawyer wrote this.
Don't you love it when people say that was your lawyer present?
And then you're in trouble for signing it. And another thing that gets me is, you know, in my profession, I have to explain things to people so they understand.
Yeah.
You don't try to hide behind language, and I'm held to a standard. So I can actually explain things to people. They sign a consent stating that they understand it, and if there's a bad outcome that they knew could happen, I could still be sued successfully.
You know.
And you know what? Those standards should be high, and I think the same standard should apply to lawyers.
Absolutely,
they should be responsible for the information they gave you. I find that they have to answer to no one. And it sets up for a level of arrogance that's astonishing.
One of the strange things about listening to your case is that when you tell somebody the story, let's say, for instance, you only got partial way in, and maybe the phone rang or something, and you never get a chance to finish the story. How does that feel? I know I've had that situation happen to myself. You start the story, and maybe they don't seem to be interested, or they don't have a belief system that's like yours, like the story you're telling might be somehow fake or not really real, didn't really happen to you. And then they walk away, and that story was left unfinished. That happened to me many times. I've seen it happen to other people more. It's important only because look at that information that went out partial, and that belief system stuck. So if they had a belief system that you were not, somehow the legal system was good, if they had that, and you didn't get to that point where you really explained yourself all the way,
your jaw drops from the beginning, so you can't
just
catch the next part.
Connects,
So it's like trying to describe a horrific 12-car pileup
Right.
what just happened here?
Yeah,
You know,
right,
and you
right.
can't explain everything that happened in motion. And what I find is the more I try to tell people, they still can't believe it from the beginning.
This is what I was getting at.
Yeah, and then you lose everything that goes on from there.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, if you walked up to me and told me that what happened to me happened to you, I would never believe it. It's like, that's impossible.
That's right.
There is no way. And the worst part for the both of us is you lose credibility.
Yes.
If she attempts to tell her story, no one believes her. It's like, and you could see it in her eyes. I mean, you
And
start
you can,
talking.
that's what I meant. That
Yeah.
happened to me for
They
the
tried
longest
to
time.
take my other
Yeah.
child. I remarried and had
Yeah.
another baby, and they were going to take him away
Yeah, it's
because
incredible.
they assumed I must have done something wrong. How could you take my other baby? Like,
Yeah.
it was so horrific taking my 3 other ones
Sure.
to take the one that I was told would never be taken away.
Not
on the
having
basis
done
of
anything wrong.
nothing. I said, I've never done a drug. I don't drink. I had a drink at my wedding. I mean, it's like ridiculous. The worst I've ever had was a speeding ticket. And this man has felony records and arrest records like crazy, and he gets custody of the children. Like you said, your jaw, it just sounds so unbelievable, nobody believes you.
You have to say it, so I appreciate that you did, because if you didn't, nobody would believe us. Look at the problem we're having now. Look, I'm doing a television show that's been at this for quite a while, and I've been bringing up these stories. Look how long it's taken me to get to this point, and I don't even know where I am. I mean, I'm trying my best to do what I can to get this sunlight in, to get this information out there, and I have no guarantee that next week, next month when the program airs, that enough people have seen it to go, wow, I got to take charge of this. This is not right. Somebody has to do something here. There's no guarantee it's ever going to work.
Problem, sorry, is just the power of the attorneys. You know, you look at I love referring to the documentary Divorce Court because I was stunned. I sat there with Gary Jacobs and I was stunned. And it's a $50 billion a year industry, so it's very easy for them to crush the media and to tell them to stay away from these things.
We're not paying attention to it either, which they also do.
So you need people who can fight against the grain, and you fight a lone fight. You know, you're standing against the grain. You know, other stations don't cover these types of stories, and this is what's needed.
Yeah, it does not seem odd.
I think the suggestion of having a judicial review from
civilians,
yep, because every other job, you have to answer to somebody. A judge doesn't, so their ego is higher than God, and the lawyers are just as bad. And so I think that plays a huge part of it, because this is not about best interest or justice or any of that. This is about ego, it's about politicians, about votes, it's about all that. And in the end, you have a family completely destroyed over money. And really, that's what it is.
Some of the things that surprised me as well is, in my own case, discussing, you know, my children, and one of my children was choosing to live with me. And my goal is to always foster a relationship with her mother. And I listened to Melissa speak, and it's like, what kind of crime could you commit that the punishment would be taking your children? And there's not a single mother or father in my practice that would not hesitate to give bodily harm if you attempted to walk away with their children. If I walked into someone's living room and said, okay, I'm going to take your kids away and I'll give them back to you in about 15, 20 years, I would never make it out the front door.
Sure.
Never.
Right.
Family court, you go there and you watch your life destroyed a moment, so there's nothing you could do about it.
Isn't it strange that there's no consequence? That's the norm. See, doesn't that make perfect sense? What you just said, perfect sense, right?
And then if you choose
change.
to react to that, like, you know, I think it's in nature. You try to take your child, a bear protects its cubs. It's just nature. Mother and father will naturally protect its young. They come and take it, and if you say something, if you're vocal about it, if you break down and cry, they claim you're mentally unstable to not have your child, and you're like, this is unbearable.
We have to lie down and accept it, yeah.
That would break anybody down, to have their children taken from them. And you know, I think that you do not understand it until it happens to you.
Right.
And when you do, there's a select few people. People could sympathize with you, they will never truly understand it. And I sat there in court myself, and I listened to a legal guardian and my ex-wife's attorney and the judge trying to discuss what's best for my children. It's like, I have more expertise than everybody in this room right now. Together. And
right.
I don't mean to sound
no, but you are a pediatrician, let's face it.
And I do, and I said, I'm not allowed to speak.
But more importantly, you're their father.
That is true. That is true. But there's a certain sense of, I understand clearly what's going on, and I'm listening to people little to no expertise, and at least in the field of pediatrics, child development, telling me what's in the best interest of my children, and none of it makes sense. They would never be able to justify or even explain what happens in court. It makes no sense. And one day, I am convinced that one day people will look back on this and they'll jump on the bandwagon. They'll say they were outraged. They couldn't believe this happened. And to me, it's almost like when you hear or you watch a movie and there's a soldier who says, "I was just following orders," and it was an unconscionable order. That's another thing I found amazing about family court. They can continue to punish you, and if you sign something, well, that needs to go to Supreme Court. So you can't fix it in family court, but they can destroy your life and continue to destroy you. Now, if you're like myself, then you just bankrupt, you depleted the funds. You don't have the resources to go to Supreme Court.
Right, it costs money to do everything to get back your freedom, to get back your life.
You don't have
get back your kids, whatever it is you're trying to get back.
That's what your life becomes.
Yeah.
And people don't realize the depression that goes along with that, or the suicide rate.
Suicide rate has risen, by the way, mostly for men, but it has risen a great deal for the younger father, you know, the 20-year-old, the 30-year-old, in that range. And I don't know what the reason is other than to say that most of those were divorce court related.
I was doing statistics and I was reading how many murders happened in 2013, and the statistic was shockingly lower than I anticipated. It was less than 15,000. Suicide among people who were going through divorce and elderly, it was over 100,000 a year in 2013. And that is shocking numbers, that more people choose to kill themselves than other people would kill them. And ironically, over 50% of the murders were because of domestic violence.
I have shaken hands. I've had people on the set who have shared their issues with me and have since, or hence, committed suicide. I knew them, knew that they were hurting by the system, but they looked fairly normal to me. But the complete, maybe you can relate to this, Doc, the complete depression doesn't always set in when you're either on stage or turned on to get on the air, or at home when you're with your significant other. Sometimes it happens when you're alone. Whatever the case may be, to drive someone to that point related to the divorce is what we're all about.
Problem is you don't know when it's going to strike. That's one of the things. It comes, and that could be a time in your life where I have everything in the world to be happy about right now, and it sneaks up on you and it hits you. And I don't think that, you know, one of the things that infuriates me is when you listen to comments regarding the so-and-so took the easy way out. You know, it's like you have no idea. You have no idea what the pain is like that they're going through. You don't know what it's like to be at the precipice where you understand you have things to live for, you have children, and it almost seems like I don't want to live another second of this torture. And you know, I've felt that precipice. I've been there, and something makes me turn back and come back for more punishment. And it makes me wonder, how much did it hurt for that person to take the next half step?
Look at Robin Williams, right?
Which is unbelievable. You look at him, like he was on top of the world, and he's funny. And the pain that was hidden, I think some of us
that's right. That's a good example. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
But I think incidents like this and the excruciating pain of never feeling like you can get out of the system, for me, it was a 7-year ordeal, and basically, for sanity, I had to let go of them. And there are 3 children I won't have that kind of relationship with. You know?
You grieve a living child.
Yes.
You grieve a child that's still alive.
Yeah, when you can't see them, it's right. The worst of the worst happens.
And then they turn on you. That's the worst part. They think you're this horrible monster because they've been fed all this negativity. And
you can't help but feel hurt by that.
The tentacles are enormous that happens to people who go through court and lose their children, lost their connection, and I thank you both very, very much for sharing in that. We're out of time on the show, but thank you very much. It was very important for us to do that. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. And at FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. We always invite all opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.